Hello, everyone. So, who wants to be between the guy working to cure cancer and lunch? Apparently me. So I'm going to talk to you about the title of my talk, Stretchy Pants and Marginal Gains, and it's really the bookends of the sort of my career, I suppose, from where I started and spent most of my time to where I am now at the glorious Lululemon. What are marginal gains is often a question I'm asked. Well, marginal gains are those teeny, tiny differences that make the difference between gold, silver, bronze, winning, losing, those teeny, tiny microseconds that athletes of all ilks are chasing. There is no panacea in performance, as I'm sure Tu would attest to in the search for curing cancer. And so, really, I'm a marginal gains dealer. So I've spent my life, my career part of my life, searching for and working with athletes to help them find those teeny, tiny things. And that's sort of what myself and the tribe that I belong to, we're like the dealers of marginal gain. So if you're looking for a marginal gain, perhaps I can hook you up at lunchtime. The field in which I operate in is called sports technology. Sports technology is this sort of battleground between the human being and engineering technology. It's a place where we understand physiology, biomechanics, so the science of movement, the way athletes prepare themselves from nutritional, from everything that is about the physical that then can be augmented or optimized with the application of technology. And the research that I started off was actually looking for ways to train the muscles that you use to breathe, because it's a massively inefficient system. And so we were coming up with the technologies, training those muscles and redistributing blood around the body to improve performance, so you could tap into energy in a totally different way. You can apply that same discipline to thermal comfort, surviving in different environments, moving faster through water, which is where I've spent sort of the most recent part of my career. Anything to do with being better. Technology can be applied, and it's usually to create marginal gains. When I showed this to my wife, she said, "Why on earth have you got a picture of an eyebrow?" So this is a sort of a what is possible type slide. And to bring some tangibility to those tiny marginal gains that we've been working towards. So there's a really great story of the 2008 Olympics, where the British track cycling team had huge dominance. I don't know if anyone follows track cycling, but the UK are awesome at it. And what they put that awesomeness down to is all of the tiny amounts of preparation to go and chase those marginal gains. In fact, David Brailsford is kind of the godfather of this discipline. And there was one particular athlete, Chris Hoy, who's a sprint cyclist, very, very short event, all based on power. There's an awful lot going on in split seconds. The preparation that they put into getting Chris Hoy to that level of readiness with the training that they were doing, with the simulation that they were doing, they found a few really interesting things. And when they looked back then at the race, so his first gold medal at the Olympics, which he 0.01 seconds. So gold and silver was differentiated by that small fraction of time. When they went back over the simulations and they were looking at all of the equipment that they'd put onto his body, which was primarily there to reduce drag or to stabilize him so that he could put all that power down, they worked out that if they'd exposed his eyebrow, which they didn't, they had a really cleverly designed mask over his face. If they'd exposed his eyebrow, that would have cost him 0.01 seconds of drag. So hence the eyebrow. And the difference that you can make by really understanding these tiny, tiny degrees. This, though, creates a huge debate in the industry that I serve, because there's a few people that obviously want to keep control, and the interesting existence is that battle of control and what gets to be the thing that helps you win. And the Olympic Committee really is the primary one for this, and They say the goal of the Olympic movement is to contribute to building a peaceful and better world by educating youth through sport practice without discrimination of any in a spirit of friendship, solidarity, and fair play. This is where I exist. Fair play. And you can imagine then that this is, pretty subjective sort of realm to exist in. And so that what boils down is every discipline, every sports discipline has their own interpretation of fair play. And they create a set of rules and we operate within those rules. The one that I've most recently existed in, so before I came over to work for Lululemon, was with Speedo, working for an entity within Speedo called the Aqualab, who was responsible for all the R&D and innovation around the Olympic Games for swimming. And our job was to help people like Michael Phelps and various other superstars. He seems to be, the biggest superstar of that sport, but to help them get towards their goals of winning the gold medals. In swimming, there's a really nice curve, and so FINA are the governing body of swimming. They're based in Switzerland, and there's a wonderful, wonderful man called Professor Jan Anders Madsen, who has the unenviable task of setting the rules in terms of testing product related to technology to manage swimming, to keep the sport of swimming alive at the right level. And he built this graph as a rationale for the steps that were taken to modify the rules, to create certain legality of what products were and were not allowed. I actually call it the how to freak FINA out slide, because all of these are an application of knowledge driving technology. So if you take the sort of the decades of development, and this is the world record for the 100 meters freestyle for women. And so you see in the 60s we had big changes in technique. The flip turn came around. So just by looking at the sport and the preparation of the sport, understanding the transitions as you move through a race, that created a big change. And these big steep slopes of change. There's lots of data points spread throughout this whole, but I've just identified the big shifts. Then we move into sort of the mid-70s. I put new chemistry question mark because I don't want to get in trouble, but this is the period where doping was apparently rife, and we saw huge shifts. That's the steepest of all the curves, whereby the speculation was the ability for an athlete to achieve higher levels of performance than their genetic potential was starting to come alive. It didn't stop the development, though. So knowing that WADA, the World Anti-Doping Association, has phenomenal controls now, and they're extremely tapped into what's going on with athletes and their preparation, we're still able to start to see changes and reductions in the times. So then came in the 80s new facilities, so bigger pools, deeper pools, wider lane divisions, management of ripples. All of these things were in fact interrupting with potential drag and slowing swimmers down. So that little shift came along. Then there was a bit of a quiet time. And the quiet time came, as we go through late 80s until what started around the 2000s. And I like to think that Speedo really were the ones that drove that. And in particular, the 2008 Olympics, where the laser racer, which was a product that I inherited, so my predecessors were responsible for creating that product. But here you had a technology that was able to, the results were 89% of all gold medals at the 2008 Olympics for swimming, 93% of all medals, a phenomenal success. And you can see then why FINA would react. It's like, oh dear, we've got a problem. Technology is, so it was called technical doping at the time. Technology is resulting in the damage of our sport. The athletes are no longer the important thing. However, I look at that differently. Because I look at technology differently, obviously I want to keep myself in a job. So should there really be any concern? And what I do is look at the plot in this way. Because really, what people like me are responsible for is helping a human tap into more of their potential. So technology just helps you to overcome strange environments that you choose to perform or exist in. And the shape of this plot when you do it over a long period of time and project it out to 2020, it's telling us that we're reaching that point where there isn't going to be any change, where we really will have tapped into true human potential. So I just want you to think about that for a little while. It's quite a worrying thing in terms of being able to continue to get those gains, but it's quite an important fundamental point about what is the place of sports technology in a sport. And so then I go back to being a little bit philosophical. And when you look at the human being as a species, there's two things that differentiate us from every other species on the planet. We make fire and we clothe ourselves. So going back to that previous curve and going back to having this concept of having to be in fair play, I really look at the role of technology as it is to be human, and I reflect on the fact that it's fundamental. Technology is fundamental in terms of being human. It allows us to be the most successful species on the planet. It allows us to survive and perform in really extreme environments. And so the fact that I don't know whether it's exactly 95% finished, but we are not 100% finished. We don't keep the fur as other animals. We have a nakedness that gives us a sort of a blank canvas to play with so that we can then go and be really successful in very specific situations. And so I really do like to re-look at why people should be worried about technology having a place in something like sport, when all we're doing, as it would seem, is helping people to get closer and closer towards their potential. Now, potential. It's an interesting phenomenon because we don't all have the potential to be gold medalists. I'm sorry, we don't. There is a genetic predisposition to a particular sport, and if you happen to find it, lucky you. And that will come down from great coaching, great, situational coincidence. And if you are able then to find that sport that is suited to your body, Michael Phelps is famed for having particularly long wingspan. He is able to do things in the pool based on his physical form that you cannot train to be that physical form. You are born with that physical form. And I can definitely say I've never seen another human being move through the water like he can across all of his competitors. But physical perfection only gets you so far. It doesn't make you a fish. As a human being, water is an alien environment. So other things have to be done, whether that's finding different techniques, finding different strokes, understanding how the pool works, and adding technology. And the technology sometimes really, really works. And I've sort of mentioned the points before, but this was the product that Speedo created, where they managed to get a perfect marriage between a human being at their most physically perfect, genetically correct form for swimming, with a product that allowed them to access truly that potential in the alien environment of water. Now, at this time, and this was really the pivot for FINA and the pivot of the debate about technical doping, the interesting things that were going on were, at that time, the most of the feedback I was getting from coaches when I got their feedback going to the next world champs and the next events after that was the wrong guys were winning. So there was this strange sort of thing that then, well, if you've got a physically perfect person and a technically perfect product, how is that possible? Shouldn't the best guys now be winning by even more? And what we were finding was, well, actually, the majority of the people out there, or certainly a large swathe of them, were not physically perfect. They weren't Michael Phelps. And it just so happened that this suit, because it squashed you so much, if you were squashy, it really worked for you. If you were, some of the guys that had worked so hard to get these incredible physiques, next to zero body fat, it didn't work so well for them. So it was a really interesting, debate that started to then rage around the relationship between what technology was doing and all of the work that the coach has been doing in preparing their athletes. So I go back to this slide. Do I really believe that I can guarantee a reduction in drag of 0.01 seconds. Because really, if we put those swimsuits into the water, they certainly don't go anywhere. Some people would say they float on the surface. Ours didn't, promise. But they don't go anywhere. They don't swim on their own. They require the athlete to be motivated. And go back to the example of Chris Hoy, the cyclist, as he's powering towards the finish line with his single opponent next to him, within a hair's breadth probably away from him. Is it really the drag that was the differentiator in him moving over, winning or not winning? I say no, I don't think it was. I think the technology is out there to help you to tap into something, but ultimately it's will that gets you over that line. And there's something about will that is not really that understood or tapped into that I think is the most fundamentally fascinating component of working in elite sport. So then we go to the mind. Now, there's a lot of information out there about the mind, and there's an increasingly greater understanding of the mind and its role in performance. Obviously from an intellectual point of view, and decision-making and control mechanisms to make the muscles and the body work really well. But the question that we would ask as scientists is, well, if we're developing technology, can we help the mind to be perfected? And then can we create this awesome triangle of mind, body, technology, so that we can be the responsible for these athletes, again, coming into the gold medals and the like. And so that's then where we come back to this concept of the mind and how do we train it. I'm sure people have heard of things like visualization, and you can apply signals to different parts of the brain to improve memory and that kind of thing. But one of the things that's become really, really interesting are these mindful pursuits. So things like yoga, meditation, the things that when I said to colleagues as I was sort of leaving the UK, packing up to move to Vancouver, in the UK, yoga is a certain demographic that I have to probably be very careful to talk about. But one of the comments would be, why would you want to go to Canada and work with old ladies? It's like that. There's a strange gap. Absolutely doesn't exist in Vancouver at all. It's a totally different world. But there was something fascinating about mindful pursuits and what they offered in terms of really hitting that potential. And the question now that I exist in is, well, what if your ability to optimize something like yoga or meditation for your particular sport in your particular moment, in your particular day, that was the difference in between success and failure? Because there's some really interesting mechanisms with these activities. So yoga is where you send your brain and your body in opposite directions. So you apply a physical stress of doing something like that. And I can't do that, but I know it hurts. And the brain is in a mode of calm, of control, of working with the breath to deal with the stress response that is firing all over the body applied by the physical pose. And then meditation is a layer deeper than that. So you go into meditation and it isn't just about how you're dealing with the world. This is where you start to separate conscious thought, subconscious reaction. And once you get into understanding that, you realize that those people that are the most, say, mindful, the most practiced yogis, the most practiced meditators, they're able to start to detach themselves. And mindfulness is defined as the non-judgmental awareness of the present. So imagine, as an athlete on the starting line, all the anticipation, 4 years of training. What does it take to get focused, to know that you have the physical potential and you've got the best technology that money can buy or that man can make? And in your mind, you're able to control all of those responses and all of those moments leading through the 20, 30, 50 seconds, depending on how long your race is, to then get to that finish line and come first and react to everything that happens around you in a really positive way. And actually, the proponents of this kind of approach is not necessarily where you'd think it. So a lot of Red Bull athletes, extreme sports athletes, where they're getting to the point where a lot of athletes physically are kind of, they're getting quite similar because they're interacting with a lot of technology. But when you're going through 1,080 degrees of rotation, what's the thing that firstly keeps you alive, and then in terms of judgment and success, in terms of if you're looking to win, what is the thing that separates you? Seems to be mindfulness. So when people ask me, why did I pack up my things, stick them into it? They didn't give me a container, but not one with Lululemon on it anyway. But why then do people like me, searching for marginal gains to deliver success and failure in microseconds? What's so interesting about mindful pursuits? Well, I can tell you from everything that I'm seeing, mindful pursuits are going to be the difference for elite sports, and that's why I'm here and I'm loving and staying in Vancouver. Thank you.